Lenovo's Legion Go S is one of their newer handhelds, and it's more powerful than a Steam Deck, but this Z2 Go version gets a lot of hate. Is that necessarily justified? Let's take a look and find out. Now, this system has a lot in common with something like an ROG Ally, Steam Deck, MSI Claw, stuff like that. This has an 8-inch IPS 120Hz VRR screen, and as someone who has had a Steam Deck and a Steam Deck OLED, I would say that honestly I do like this screen a little bit better than either. It's not necessarily as great color-wise as a Steam Deck, but it's very good for an IPS, but it's bigger, higher resolution, and goes up to 120 Hz. And compared to the 800p screen on the Steam Deck, this is pretty much nicer in my opinion. It's available with both the Z1 Extreme and the Z2 Go chips. This has the Z2 Go. They're both more powerful than a Steam Deck, but the Z2 Go is kind of in a weird middle land. It's not as powerful as the Z1 Extreme, and it's really similar to the Steam Deck in that they both have 4 cores, 8 threads of CPU. It has 50% more GPU cores than the Steam Deck. It can also suck down a lot more power, so the performance ceiling is higher for this than the Steam Deck's chip. It's still not going to play AAA games at full frame rates on high settings. That's something that I don't think any of these handheld chips can do. Even the new Z2 Extreme, you're going to be running stuff on medium or making some compromises to like resolution or settings or something if you want to play them natively on a handheld. These really shine though for playing older games, emulation, and stuff like that. And if you really want to play the newest games on high settings, you can always stream these from a desktop PC or a gaming laptop through something like Steam Remote Play or Moonlight or one of those type of apps. This handheld itself, it feels nice in the hand. It's very ergonomic, I would say. It has these big rounded grips on the side. It feels a lot like you're holding an Xbox controller. The buttons are very Xbox-ish. They're glossy, round buttons. They're not as clickety-clackety as the Xbox. They're a little quieter, but they feel really good. It has Hall effect joysticks, and those also feel nice. The D-pad, however, though, it's kind of there. It's not good or bad, but I'd say it's kind of mid. And these little buttons here, they're very clicky. Your start and select buttons are on the bottom, and then your Steam overlay buttons are on the top. And I wish those were flip-flopped. Oh yeah, I haven't mentioned it, but this white version came with Windows 11 installed, and pretty much the first thing I did was swap that out to SteamOS when I got it. You can run more games on Windows 11, like if you have Game Pass or you really want to play Fortnite or Call of Duty multiplayer, but for 95% of people, SteamOS is just a way better experience for general use on a handheld, I think. And it was pretty easy to get up and running on here. You can just download the SteamOS installer, set up a USB drive, and get it up and running in like not very long at all, maybe half an hour. This does have a version, the purple one, that ships with SteamOS, and so it's very optimized, and I think Valve themselves is handling, some of the updates and stuff to make sure this thing works good with SteamOS. So that's definitely an option. No matter which color you get, you can choose to install SteamOS. Price-wise, this thing is pretty expensive at the MSRP, and I personally think that at MSRP, it's not really a great deal, or I couldn't recommend it at the MSRP. But this is the Windows version with 32 gigs of memory and a 1 terabyte SSD, and it was on sale for $4.99, and I got it open box for even less than that. So for less than the price of a refurbished Steam Deck OLED 1 terabyte, I was able to get the 1 terabyte Legion Go S with 32 gigs of memory, the bigger screen, faster processor, and all of that. So if you're in the market for one, if you can find one of these when they're on sale, I would say at that point it is a better deal than the Steam Deck OLED. So I talked a little bit about the joysticks, the D-pad. It does have some front-firing speakers. They're decent but not amazing. You can go into desktop mode and install some apps to help boost sound and stuff, because I think that the possible capabilities of the speaker are better than what they sound like with the default software. But I will say it is nice having them front firing as opposed to the Legion Go where they're top firing. That's kind of a boggling decision why you would have speakers top firing on a handheld, but this is the proper position and where you want your speakers for a handheld. On the top of the system, you have a power button, volume up and down, headphone jack, and 2 USB-C ports. That's pretty handy if you want to charge and hook something up at the same time, but they are pretty close together. So if one of your USB-C devices has like, a fat end on it, it's going to be hard to plug 2 things in at the same time. You might need some kind of extender or something. On the back, you got some ventilation and a couple of paddle buttons. You can also switch these to adjust how far you want the triggers to move. You can set it for like a hair trigger option, or if you want deeper analog control, you can do that too. The fan in the back can get pretty loud. I will say when you're playing it, on my side, it's not very loud, but for people sitting over here, like on the other side, it's much more audible. It's not terrible though, and I mean, if you're running a PC in the palm of your hand, there's gotta be a trade-off somewhere. At least it does keep the system really cool, so it's an audible cooling system, but hey, it's doing its job. The touchscreen is nice and responsive. It's glossy. I do have a screen protector on here, so it's glass. Maybe it's a little even more reflective. You can see my lights back there. Yeah, it's a decent screen. It is IPS. I will say though that since it's like laminated with glass and everything, you get a little better contrast than you would on, say, a typical IPS monitor. That, whatever they do, it's like an old MacBook, how they had the glossy glass-fronted IPS screens, and you get a little better contrast because of that. I believe this comes in more at like a 2,000 to 1 contrast ratio versus a typical 1,000 to 1 IPS. So it does have better contrast than most IPS monitors, but it's not on the same level as an OLED by any means. It is really saturated though. Colors pop on it. It's rich, bright. Overall, it's a very pleasing display, I would say. There's also not a lot of ghosting as far as IPS screens go, so this is pretty decent for gaming on. One weird thing is this super tiny trackpad. It's about the size of smaller than like a chiclet piece of gum. It's very tiny. I would say borderline unusable with your thumb. It has a hard time even recognizing that you're using it or where your thumb is. So if you do want to use it, it's kind of awkward, but you can use your little pointer finger front ways on it. Seems really weird. It still doesn't work good most of the time. If you have anything you need to do with like a mouse interface, I would just recommend trying to touchscreen it or hook up a USB mouse or something. I guess it's good it's there in case of an emergency, but I wouldn't bank on it or actually use it most of the time. You also have an micro SD slot on the bottom if you need to add more storage. You can run games off of that. If you run emulation too, it can be kind of handy to just have that set up as your whole emulation library with all your ROMs and stuff set on there, and just plug it in. Then if you ever need to mess around with those files, it might be way easier to just pop that out, stick it in your desktop, rearrange stuff, and then move it back instead of trying to do everything through the Linux desktop with the touchscreen. Or it gives you some options at least. It's got okay battery life. It greatly depends on what you're doing. If you're just playing some indie games or for some reason using this to like watch YouTube videos, it's going to give you some pretty decent battery life with that AMD processor. But as soon as you get into demanding 3D games, or even like a mid-range 3D games and you want decent performance, you're going to be boosting that TDP up above 20 watts. And once you get up into the higher performance, the battery drains quick, especially if you want to enjoy that bright screen and not have it down on like 50% brightness or lower. A lot of the time I was only seeing 1 to 2 hours of battery life when playing actual games. Not super ideal, but that's kind of the nature of most of these handhelds. Once you amp that power draw up, they're just gonna die soon. The Z2 Go, now, for a lot of AAA games, you're gonna be able to play on like native resolution, medium settings, and get maybe 40-ish to 50-ish frames per second. If you want to get to 60 or higher, you're gonna have to start making a lot of concessions, whether that's with FSR or some other sort of resolution scaling or lowering settings or stuff like that. It's going to be a mixed bag and depend and vary greatly depending on what title you're playing and what resolution you're trying to run it at. It is going to get you better than Steam Deck performance, but these handhelds are not going to come anywhere close to like a real gaming laptop or desktop and what those would do for you. You always have the option of streaming to these with GeForce Now. I personally enjoy using the Steam Deck in-home streaming a lot from my desktop or laptop, depending where I'm at, and that works okay. I did have some weird bugs on this where it would just super lag out. You're playing your game and it just looks frozen on here, but it's still moving normally on the computer, and it would take sometimes up to like 30 seconds or a minute for it to catch up. I also stream to like a backbone controller with my phone, and I've never encountered that, but this did have some weird bugs that, I don't know, it was not very optimal to say the least, but it did work most of the time. If that's your primary use case and you just want to stream games to it, you obviously don't need something this big, expensive, and heavy, and I would say that the backbone or other phone controller mixed with like just a phone with a nice screen and speakers is going to be a better experience for less money. You know, it's going to have a longer lasting battery, it's a lot lighter to hold. Depending on your phone, like I use a 16 Pro, so that has an OLED screen, better speakers than these. If that's your prime use case, I wouldn't recommend this. This is obviously more for playing games on natively. Compared to the Steam Deck, I do find this better, you know, for general use. It's a lot more comfortable in my opinion, having these rounded edges. Even though it's heavier than a Steam Deck by a little bit, it's more comfortable to hold. I can't speak to what the Windows experience is like, but you know, having SteamOS on it, it makes it a generally nice device to use. For the lighter weight and old school games, I mean, it was really fun. If you just want to play, you know, some older RPGs, if you want to attack your Steam backlog. I was blowing up some bugs in one of the older Earth Defense Force games. That was pretty fun. The Katamari games are great on here. Most of your Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest type stuff. Even a lot of the newer Call of Duty multiplayers won't run on here, but I was playing the Modern Warfare Remastered, the Call of Duty 4 version. That ran great on here. You could run it at the full 1200p, and the controls felt good. For really almost any game that's older, you're gonna have a really good experience on this. If you want to play your Cyberpunks, Hogwarts, all of those type of things that are newer and more demanding, that's when you're really going to have to start making concessions on these handhelds. Even some of the newer games that are easier to run, like Forza Horizon 5, I found were kind of a mixed bag on here. With the wattage turned up, you could get pretty decent performance, but the 1% lows left a lot to be desired. Even on medium settings in Forza Horizon 5, I pretty much couldn't play it with like a real stable fluid frame rate like I would like to. No matter what I did, once you started going off the road and hitting some debris or trees or anything like that, and even when you're driving through heavier traffic, the frame fluctuations were noticeable, and in a racing game or something like that, it's kind of real distracting and throws you off. It makes it just hard to play without a stable frame rate. So really the best solution in that case is like limiting your frame rate down to 30 or 40, and at that point it's just not the super fluid PC gaming experience that I think a lot of people are looking for when they buy a device like this. Your choices are somewhat limited in this market though. I mean, you have the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, the MSI Claw, the Lenovo's bigger Legion Go, and all of these come with some trade-offs. They're all going to be kind of big, kind of heavy, not going to perform as well as a laptop. They are novel in that it does let you play the games natively on this system, but there needs to be some kind of a generational leap in the processors for these before they really hit what they're going to be capable of doing. And I understand why Valve is waiting so long to put out the Steam Deck 2, because even with these higher performance chips compared to the Steam Deck, they're still all kind of like on the same level, and none of them are really breaking down the walls and giving you a new experience that you couldn't have before. Maybe in the future when AMD comes out with a newer generation of these mobile chips, we'll actually get something that's closer in performance to like what you can get from a mid-range gaming laptop with a lot less power draw. And once that happens, if we get one of those paired with a real OLED screen or something, that's gonna be worth waiting for. I do like this colorway of it, you know, if you can't tell, I enjoy the white computers and peripherals. The purple one doesn't look bad either, but I personally like this one better, and that's kind of why I went with it. Having the 32 gigs of RAM is also a nice bonus. The lower end SteamOS version is $599 normally, and that only comes with 16 gigabytes of memory. On these, that's split between your video memory and system memory. And so being able to have like 12 gigs of VRAM and what would that be? Like 20 gigs of system RAM? That's gonna give this little chip way more than it even needs, and you're not gonna have to worry about running out of memory. The Z2 Go versus Z1 Extreme. This obviously is gonna have lower performance, but they're, in my opinion, both in the same ballpark, and I don't think that you're gonna be sad if you get one over the other. Both of them are going to do really good for indie games, emulation, older games, stuff like that. They're really going to have a lot more varying performance in the newer games. But honestly, I think all of these systems are going to have to like struggle, or you're going to have to make compromises to get those AAA games running with acceptable performance, no matter how good of a processor you put in one of these, just because that's all that's available right now. So if you want to save a buck and you just want one of these to dink around with and play backlog games, I think the Z2 Go is actually a pretty good choice. You're saving several $100s and you're still getting 90% of the same experience. If you really want the best of the best though, and you want to play Cyberpunk natively on your handheld with the best settings you can, then pony up and get the Z1 Extreme. All in all, this is a pretty fun device, you know. It's okay to hold in your hand. It is heavier than something like a Switch, but I'd say in the same ballpark as like a Steam Deck. It has a better screen than a Steam Deck. It's about half the price of the new Legion Go 2. And if you get it on a sale, it's actually pretty competitive. Don't buy one at MSRP though. I would not advise paying over $700 for something with the Z2 Go. Just don't. Do you have one of these, or are you thinking about picking one up? Drop a comment down below, let me know what you think. And if you've liked this video, hit that like button and maybe subscribe if you want to see some more. Thank you for watching along though, and I'll catch you in the next video.